The man with the scar along his jaw asked her where to find books on Seoul architecture, and she didn't notice the way everyone else in the library had gone quiet. It was a Tuesday in March. Rain drummed against the tall windows of the downtown branch, turning the afternoon gray and soft. She'd been reshelving returns in the travel section when he appeared at the end of the aisle, perfectly still, watching her with eyes that didn't blink often enough. Seoul architecture, she repeated, sliding a guidebook back into place. Historical or contemporary? Both. His English was flawless but accented, each word chosen with care. He wore a black coat that probably cost more than her monthly salary, and his hands were in his pockets. She couldn't see them. Something about that felt deliberate. Section 720.9519, second floor. I can show you. She led him to the stairs. Behind them, the circulation desk clerk whispered something urgent into her phone. The security guard near the entrance shifted his weight, hand moving toward his radio. She noticed none of it. She was thinking about the leak in her apartment bathroom and whether her landlord would finally fix it. The second floor was quieter. Rain light filtered through skylights, casting everything in shades of pearl and smoke. She walked him to the architecture section, ran her finger along spines until she found what she wanted. This one covers the Joseon dynasty palaces. This one's about modern development post-1970s. She pulled both books, held them out. If you need anything more specific, the research desk can. You know these books. It wasn't a question. His gaze moved from the books to her face, studying her the way someone might study a map before a long journey. I majored in art history, architecture's adjacent. She smiled the way she smiled at all patrons, professional, helpful, forgettable. Is there a particular building you're interested in? I'm interested in knowing how a librarian in Seattle knows, which books to recommend without checking the system. The comment made her pause. Most people didn't notice things like that. Most people didn't look at her the way he was looking at her now, like she was a problem that required solving. I've worked here 5 years. You learn the collection. He took the books from her hands. His fingers were long, graceful, marked with scars she pretended not to see. There was a ring on his right hand, thick silver, with an engraving she couldn't make out. Thank you. You're welcome. Let me know if you need anything else. She turned to leave. His voice stopped her. You're not afraid of me. She looked back. He was still watching her, head tilted slightly, expression unreadable. Should I be? The question hung between them. Outside, thunder rolled low and long. He smiled then, just barely, a shape that didn't reach his eyes. No. She nodded and walked away, back down to the first floor where patrons waited and the world was ordinary. She forgot about him by the time she reached the circulation desk. She didn't see the way he stood at the second floor railing, watching her move through the stacks. She didn't see the 2 men in dark suits who appeared near the entrance, waiting. She didn't see any of it. 3 months later, she would remember everything. Her name was Elena, and she lived in a studio apartment in Belltown with a view of a brick wall and a bathroom sink that dripped no matter how tight she turned the handle. She was 28. She had a degree she'd never used and a job she was good at. She read books on her lunch break and took the bus home because her car had died 2 years ago and she couldn't afford to replace it. Her life was small and predictable and safe. Until the night Marcus came back. She was closing the library. It was June now, the days long and bright, the kind of evening where the city felt almost gentle. She locked the staff entrance and started walking toward the bus stop, bag over her shoulder, earbuds in. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her until a hand closed around her arm. Elena. She spun. Marcus stood too close, his face flushed, his breath sharp with alcohol. They'd dated for 8 months 2 years ago. He'd moved to Portland for work. She'd thought it was over. Clean. Finished. Let go. I came back for you. His grip tightened. I've been thinking about you, about us. There is no us. Let go of my arm. His eyes went hard. You think you're better than me now. You think you can just ignore my messages. She hadn't ignored them. She'd blocked his number after the 10th message, the ones that shifted from pleading to angry to something darker. She pulled against his grip. He didn't release her. I drove 6 hours to see you. I didn't ask you to. You owe me a conversation. The street was empty. The library behind her was dark. The bus stop was 2 blocks away, and she couldn't see anyone near it. Her pulse kicked hard against her throat. I don't owe you anything. Let go, or I'm calling the police. Marcus laughed, bitter and sharp. Go ahead, tell them what? That your ex-boyfriend wanted to talk. She reached for her phone. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it just enough to hurt, and the phone clattered to the pavement. Fear spiked through her, bright and cold. Marcus, you don't get to walk away from me. A car door opened somewhere behind him. Footsteps calm and measured. A voice, low and accented. She already did. Marcus turned. Elena looked past him and felt the air change. The man from the library stood 5 feet away, hands in the pockets of a dark coat, expression flat. He looked exactly the same. Scar along his jaw, eyes that didn't blink. 2 men flanked him, both broader, both watching Marcus the way wolves watch wounded prey. This doesn't concern you, Marcus said, but his voice had gone thin. The man took 1 step closer. Just one. Marcus released Elena's arm. Walk away, the man said. I'm talking to my girlfriend. She's not your girlfriend. Another step. You're hurting her. Walk away or I'll make you. There was no threat in his tone. No anger, just fact delivered with the weight of absolute certainty. Marcus looked at the 2 men flanking him, then back at the man with the scar. Something in his face shifted. Survival instinct, maybe, animal recognition of a predator. This is insane, Marcus muttered, but he was already backing away, hands raised. You're insane. He turned and walked quickly toward a parked car, glancing back once before he got in and drove away. The sound of the engine faded. Silence settled, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. Elena bent and picked up her phone. The screen was cracked. Her hands were shaking. Are you hurt? She looked up. The man with the scar was watching her the same way he'd watched her in the library, studying, assessing. No, I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her wrist throbbed where Marcus had grabbed it. Her heart was still racing. Thank you. He'll come back. The certainty in his voice made her stomach drop. How do you know? Because men like him always do. He glanced at the 2 men behind him, said something in Korean. They nodded and moved toward a black SUV parked at the curb. He looked back at her. Do you live far from here? I take the bus. Not tonight. It wasn't a suggestion. He gestured toward the SUV. One of the men opened the rear door, waiting. Elena hesitated, every instinct screaming at her that getting into a stranger's car was a terrible idea. But he'd helped her. And something in his stillness, his calm, made her feel safer than she'd felt in the last 5 minutes. I don't even know your name. Jihoon. Jihoon, she repeated. The name felt formal in her mouth, like something that belonged in a different world. Why did you help me? He considered the question, head tilted slightly. Rain had started again, light and cool, misting the air between them. You helped me once. She thought back to the library, to the books on Seoul architecture, to a conversation she'd barely remembered until now. That was my job. You didn't treat me like a threat. Everyone else did. He stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the SUV. Let me return the favor. She got in. The interior smelled like leather and something faintly cedar. Jihoon slid in beside her, and one of the men closed the door. The engine started, smooth and quiet. The city slid past the tinted windows. Where do you live? She told him. He relayed the address in Korean to the driver. They didn't speak after that. She watched the streets blur, her mind spinning. Marcus had found her. Marcus had grabbed her. Marcus would have done worse if Jihoon hadn't appeared. The thought sat in her chest like a stone. He knows where you work, Jihoon said quietly. I know. Does he know where you live? She swallowed. Yes. Jihoon said nothing. He didn't need to. The implication was clear. Marcus knew where she worked. Marcus knew where she lived. Marcus had already proven he didn't care about boundaries. They pulled up outside her building, a narrow brick structure wedged between a dry cleaner and a corner store. The rain was heavier now, drumming on the roof of the SUV. Jihoon looked at the building, then at her. Pack a bag. What? You're not staying here tonight. I can't just. He knows where you live, Jihoon repeated, and his voice was still calm, still even, but there was steel underneath. He's angry. He's been drinking. He drove 6 hours to find you. Do you really think he's going to stop now? She didn't. That was the worst part. She didn't think Marcus would stop. Where am I supposed to go? Somewhere safe. He opened the door, stepped out into the rain. 5 minutes, bring what you need. She climbed out, rain soaking her hair, her jacket. One of the men followed her to the building entrance, standing just behind her as she unlocked the door. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. She took the stairs to the 3rd floor, hands shaking as she unlocked her apartment. Everything looked wrong now. The small space that had felt like refuge felt exposed, vulnerable. She grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing things inside. Clothes, toiletries, her laptop, chargers, a book she'd been reading. She moved fast, not thinking, just acting. When she came back down, Jihoon was standing in the rain, phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Korean. He ended the call when he saw her and took the bag from her shoulder without asking. The man who'd followed her up opened the SUV door again. Where are we going? She asked as they pulled away from the curb. A hotel, downtown, secure. I can't afford. You're not paying. She turned to look at him. He was watching the street, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Why are you doing this? Because you're in danger, and I can help. You don't even know me. I know enough. He glanced at her, and for a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. You didn't look at me like I was a monster. Most people do. She didn't know what to say to that. She looked down at her hands, at the faint bruise already forming on her wrist. Outside, the city glittered and blurred through rain-slicked glass. The hotel was the kind of place she'd only seen in magazines. Marble lobby, crystal chandeliers, staff who moved with the silent efficiency of people trained not to ask questions. Jihoon spoke to the concierge in English, handed over a credit card, and received 2 keycards in return. One of the men from the SUV stayed in the lobby. The other followed them to the elevator. They rode to the 15th floor in silence. The hallway was long and empty, carpeted in deep blue. Jihoon stopped at a door near the end, unlocked it, and handed her one of the keycards. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. She stepped inside. The suite was bigger than her apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, rain streaking down the glass in silver rivulets. There was a king bed, a sitting area, a bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in. Jihoon. There's food in the minibar, room service menu on the desk. If you need anything, call the front desk and ask for Mr. Kang. They'll contact me. Are you leaving? I have something to take care of. She knew what that meant, or she thought she did. The idea should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange, cold relief. You're going after Marcus. Jihoon's expression didn't change. I'm going to make sure he understands that coming near you again would be a mistake. You're going to hurt him. Only if necessary. He turned to leave. She caught his arm without thinking, her fingers closing around the fabric of his coat. He went still, looking down at her hand, then up at her face. Don't kill him, she said quietly. Jihoon's mouth curved just barely, not quite a smile. I won't. Promise me. He studied her for a long moment, and she couldn't read what he was thinking. Then he nodded once and stepped back. Her hand fell away. Lock the door, Elena. He left. She heard his footsteps fade down the hallway, heard the elevator chime. She closed the door and turned the deadbolt, leaning against the wood, her heart hammering. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window and watched the city breathe below her, lights and rain and movement that felt 1,000 miles away. She thought about Marcus. She thought about Jihoon. She thought about the way the world had split open in the space of an hour, revealing something beneath the ordinary surface, something dark and sharp and terrifying. Somewhere out in the rain, Jihoon was keeping a promise. She didn't let herself imagine what that looked like. Jihoon found Marcus at a motel near the airport, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask for ID. He was in room 12, curtains drawn, television flickering blue light against the walls. Jihoon stood outside the door and nodded to the man beside him. The lock clicked open. They went inside. Marcus was sitting on the bed, beer in hand, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as the door opened, his face shifting from confusion to recognition to fear in the space of a heartbeat. What the? Jihoon closed the door behind him. The man who'd picked the lock stayed outside, blocking the exit. Jihoon crossed the room slowly, hands still in his pockets, and stopped a few feet from the bed. We need to talk. Marcus stood, backing toward the far wall. You can't just break into my room. I didn't break in, the door was unlocked. A lie delivered with perfect calm. Sit down. I'm calling the cops. No, you're not. Jihoon took his phone from his pocket, pulled up a photo and held it out. Marcus stared at the screen. His face went pale. The photo showed Marcus's car, parked outside Elena's building earlier that evening. Another photo, time-stamped, showed him grabbing her arm. Another showed him twisting her wrist. Jihoon swiped through them slowly, methodically. These are assault, Jihoon said. Battery, stalking, given the messages you've been sending. I have copies of those too, screenshots, voicemails, all of it. Marcus's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I also have records of your employment, your address in Portland, your credit history, the restraining order your previous girlfriend filed against you 3 years ago. Jihoon pocketed his phone. I know everything about you, Marcus, and if you ever come near Elena again, I will make sure everyone else knows too. You can't. I can. Jihoon stepped closer. I will destroy your life, your job, your reputation, everything. And when there's nothing left, when you're alone and desperate and broken, I will visit you again. And that time I won't be this patient. His voice never rose. His expression never changed. That was what made it terrifying, the absolute certainty, the cold, clinical precision. Marcus sank onto the bed, hands shaking. I just wanted to talk to her. You put your hands on her. You hurt her. That's not talking. I didn't mean. I don't care what you meant. Jihoon crouched, bringing himself eye level with Marcus. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to leave Seattle tonight. You're going to delete her number. You're going to forget she exists. If I hear that you've contacted her, if I hear that you've even said her name, I will find you. Do you understand? Marcus nodded, jerking his head like a puppet. Say it. I understand. Jihoon stood. He looked down at Marcus for a long moment, his face expressionless. Then he turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. If you're smart, you'll remember this conversation. If you're not, you'll test me. I hope you're smart, Marcus. He left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. In the hallway, his associate waited, arms crossed. Is he going to be a problem? The man asked in Korean. No, Jihoon said. He's a coward. Cowards run when they realize the cost. They walked out into the rain. The SUV was waiting. Jihoon got in and pulled out his phone, checking the security feed from the hotel. Elena was sitting by the window, arms wrapped around her knees, staring out at the city. She looked small, fragile, afraid. He'd promised not to kill Marcus. He'd kept that promise. But if Marcus came back, if he so much as breathed in Elena's direction, Jihoon would break every other rule he lived by. He'd do it slowly, carefully, and he wouldn't lose a moment of sleep over it. The SUV pulled into traffic. Rain drummed on the roof. Jihoon watched the city blur past and thought about a librarian who'd handed him books without fear, who'd smiled at him like he was ordinary, who'd asked if she should be afraid, and meant it as a genuine question. He'd noticed her that day, quiet, competent, kind in a way that seemed effortless. He'd come back to the library twice after, watching from a distance, telling himself it was coincidence. It wasn't. He'd wanted to see her again, to understand why she'd looked at him and seen a person instead of a threat. Now she was in danger, and every instinct he had screamed at him to protect her, to keep her close, to make sure nothing ever touched her again. It was dangerous, this feeling. He knew that. He'd spent 15 years building walls, keeping distance, making sure no one ever got close enough to matter. Closeness was liability. Affection was weakness. He'd watched men die because they loved someone. He'd killed men who thought they could use love as leverage. But Elena didn't know who he was. She didn't know what he did. She thought he was a tourist who'd remembered a kindness. She thought he was helping her because it was the right thing to do. She had no idea she'd caught the attention of one of the most dangerous men in the Pacific Northwest, and Jihoon intended to keep it that way, for now. When he returned to the hotel, it was past midnight. He took the elevator to the 15th floor, walked quietly down the hallway, and stopped outside her door. He could hear the television inside, low murmur of voices. She was still awake. He knocked soft. "Elena, it's Jihoon." The television went silent. Footsteps. The deadbolt turned and the door opened. She stood in the doorway, still dressed, her hair pulled back, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Did you?" "He's gone. He won't come back." She exhaled, a long, shaky breath, and stepped aside. "Come in." He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. But he went inside anyway, and she closed the door behind him. The room smelled like lavender and rain. She'd left the window cracked, letting in the night air. "Did you hurt him?" "No, not the way she meant. I showed him photographs, evidence of what he did to you. I told him I'd ruin his life if he ever contacted you again. He believed me." "Will he stay away?" "Yes." She believed him too. He could see it in the way her shoulders lowered, the tension bleeding out. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, and looked up at him. "Why are you really doing this?" Jihoon considered lying. It would be easy. But she'd asked him a direct question, and something in him wanted to give her a direct answer. "Because I've spent my life around men who take what they want and hurt anyone who gets in their way. You didn't deserve what he did to you, and I was in a position to stop it." "That's not the whole reason." She was right. It wasn't. He crossed to the window, looked out at the city sprawled below, all light and shadow and secrets. "You treated me like a person," he said quietly. "Most people don't." "Why not?" He glanced back at her. She was watching him, her expression open and curious, no judgment in her eyes. She really didn't know. She had no idea who he was, what he'd done, the blood on his hands. And for a moment, he wanted to tell her. He wanted to see if she'd still look at him the same way after she knew. But he didn't, because once she knew, everything would change, and he wasn't ready for that yet. "I should let you sleep," he said instead. "Will you be here in the morning?" "Do you want me to be?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I don't want to be alone right now." Jihoon felt something tighten in his chest. Want and warning tangled together. He should leave. He should put distance between them, let her go back to her ordinary life, forget this ever happened. But the thought of walking away from her, of leaving her alone in this room, made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. Regret. "I'll be in the suite next door," he said. "If you need anything, call the front desk. They'll find me." "Jihoon." "Sleep, Elena. You're safe now." He left before she could say anything else, closing the door quietly behind him. In the hallway, he stood still for a moment, listening to the silence. Then he walked to the suite next door, the one he'd reserved for himself, and went inside. The room was identical to hers. Same view, same luxury, same emptiness. He pulled out his phone and called the man he'd left in the lobby. "Status." "The target left the motel 20 minutes ago. Drove south on I-5. We're following at a distance. Call me when he crosses the Oregon border." "Yes, sir." Jihoon ended the call. He shrugged out of his coat, poured himself a drink, and stood by the window. Below, the city pulsed with life. People moving through the rain, unaware of the violence that lived in the shadows, unaware of men like him. He thought about Elena, alone in the room next door. He thought about the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd asked him not to kill Marcus, the way she'd believed him when he promised. She trusted him. That was dangerous. Trust was a weapon, and he'd seen it used too many times. But he didn't want to use it against her. He wanted to keep her safe. He wanted to be the reason she could sleep tonight without fear, and that terrified him more than anything else. Because wanting something meant it could be taken away. And in his world, everything eventually was. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. She sat up, disoriented, before remembering where she was. The hotel. Jihoon. Marcus. Everything came back in a rush, and she pressed her hands against her face, breathing slowly. There was a knock at the door. She froze. "Elena, it's Jihoon." She exhaled and went to the door, opening it. He stood in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag that smelled like pastries. He looked exactly the same as he had last night. Calm, composed, untouchable. "Good morning," he said. "Morning." She stepped aside, and he came in, setting the coffee and bag on the table by the window. "You didn't have to. You need to eat." It wasn't a suggestion. She almost smiled. Bossy. Practical. He handed her one of the coffees. "Marcus crossed into Oregon at 3 this morning. He's still driving south. He won't be back." Relief flooded through her, so strong it made her dizzy. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Jihoon sat in the chair by the window, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "You need to file a police report, get a restraining order, create a paper trail in case he changes his mind." "Will that help?" "It's evidence, it matters." He paused. "I'll go with you if you want." She did want that. She didn't want to face this alone. But she also didn't want to rely on him, this stranger who'd appeared in her life twice now, and both times had changed everything. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. "I told you." "No, I want the real reason." Jihoon studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned back in the chair, his expression unreadable. "Because I can. Because you deserve help. And because I've spent a long time watching people get hurt by men who think they're entitled to whatever they want. I'm tired of it." It was the truth. She could hear it in his voice, see it in the way he held himself. But it wasn't the whole truth. There was something else, something he wasn't saying. She could feel it in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. "Who are you, Jihoon?" "Someone who knows how to keep you safe." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I can give you right now." She wanted to push. She wanted to demand he tell her everything. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, steady and unflinching. Maybe it was the fact that he'd already done more for her than anyone else ever had. Maybe it was the quiet certainty that if she pushed too hard, he'd disappear, and she'd never see him again. "Okay," she said quietly. Jihoon's expression softened, just barely. "Eat, then we'll go to the police station." She ate. The coffee was perfect, the pastry buttery and warm. They didn't talk much. She asked him about Seoul, and he told her about the palaces, the architecture, the way the city had changed over the years. He was careful with his words, revealing just enough to be polite without giving anything away. She noticed. She didn't comment. When they finished, she changed into fresh clothes and followed him down to the lobby. The SUV was waiting, the same driver, the same quiet efficiency. They drove to the downtown precinct, and Jihoon walked her inside, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The touch was brief, impersonal, but it steadied her. The officer who took her statement was kind. She told him everything. The messages, the confrontation, the bruise on her wrist. She showed him the cracked screen on her phone, the texts Marcus had sent before she blocked him. The officer nodded, made notes, and told her they'd file a report and start the process for a restraining order. Jihoon stood nearby, silent, watching. When the officer asked if there were any witnesses to the assault, Jihoon stepped forward. "I saw him grab her. I intervened." The officer looked at him, then at Elena. "Can you provide a statement?" "Of course." Jihoon's statement was precise, factual, devoid of emotion. He described the scene outside the library, Marcus's behavior, the physical contact. He didn't mention the photographs. He didn't mention the motel. He gave the officer just enough to support Elena's case without revealing anything about himself. When they finished, the officer handed Elena a case number and told her someone would follow up within a few days. She thanked him and walked out into the sunlight, Jihoon beside her. "What now?" she asked. "Now you go back to your life." The words hit her like cold water, just like that. "You're safe. Marcus is gone. You have a restraining order in progress. What else do you need?" She didn't know how to answer that. She didn't know what she needed, only that the idea of going back to her apartment, her job, her routine felt wrong. Incomplete. Like something had shifted inside her that couldn't be shifted back. "I don't know," she admitted. Jihoon looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. It was plain white, embossed with a phone number. No name, no logo. "If you ever need help, call this number. Someone will find me." Jihoon. "Go home, Elena. Lock your doors, be careful, and try to forget about me." He turned and walked toward the SUV. She stood on the sidewalk, the card in her hand, and watched him go. The door closed. The engine started. The SUV pulled into traffic and disappeared. She looked down at the card. The number gleamed silver in the sunlight. She should throw it away. She should forget about him, about everything that had happened. She should go back to her small, predictable life and pretend none of this was real. But she didn't throw it away. She slipped the card into her pocket and started walking, the city loud and bright around her, and she knew she'd never forget. Not the way he'd looked at her, not the way he'd kept her safe, not the feeling that, for a few hours, she'd been the most important thing in someone's world. Even if that someone was a man, she didn't understand. 3 weeks passed. Elena went back to work. She moved through her days with careful normalcy, reshelving books, helping patrons, smiling when expected. The bruise on her wrist faded. The restraining order was approved. Marcus didn't call, didn't text, didn't appear outside her apartment. He was gone, just like Jihoon said he'd be. But she thought about Jihoon constantly. She replayed their conversations, analyzed every word, every glance. She Googled his name and found nothing. She looked for him in the library, in the streets, in the crowds downtown. He was nowhere. A ghost who'd stepped into her life and vanished just as quickly. She told herself it was better this way. Safer. He'd been clear. Go back to your life, forget about me. And she tried, she really did. But at night, alone in her apartment, she'd take out the white card and stare at the number. She never called. She didn't know what she'd say. But she kept the card in her wallet, and that felt like something. A tether, a promise. And then, on a Friday in late June, everything changed again. She was working the evening shift, the library nearly empty, when 2 men walked in. They were Korean, dressed in dark suits, moving with the kind of deliberate calm that made people step aside without realizing why. They walked straight to the circulation desk and stopped in front of her. "Elena." She nodded, her pulse kicking up. "Can I help you?" One of the men pulled out his phone, showed her a photograph. It was her, standing outside the library with Jihoon the night Marcus had grabbed her. The angle was strange, taken from across the street, like surveillance. "Do you know this man?" Her throat went dry. "Why?" "Please answer the question." "I'm not answering anything until you tell me who you are." The second man reached into his jacket. She flinched, expecting a gun, but he pulled out a badge instead. FBI. Her stomach dropped. "What's going on?" "We need to ask you some questions about Park Jihoon. It's important." Park Jihoon. She'd never heard his last name before. It sounded formal, official, dangerous. "I don't know anything," she said carefully. "You were seen with him multiple times, outside this library, at the Four Seasons Hotel, downtown precinct." The agent's voice was flat, professional. "We have surveillance footage. We know you filed a police report the day after you met with him. We need to know the nature of your relationship." "I don't have a relationship with him. He helped me when my ex-boyfriend was harassing me. That's all." "Did he tell you what he does for a living?" "No." "Did he tell you why he was in Seattle?" "No." The agents exchanged a look. The first one leaned closer, his voice dropping. Park Jihoon is a person of interest in an ongoing federal investigation. We believe he's connected to organized crime, Korean mafia, money laundering, possibly worse. If he contacts you again, you need to call us immediately. Elena felt the floor tilt. Organized crime, mafia, the words didn't make sense. Jihoon was calm, controlled. He'd helped her. He'd kept her safe. He wasn't. But even as she thought it, she remembered the way people had gone quiet in the library when he appeared. The way the security guard had reached for his radio. The scars on his hands. The men in suits who followed him everywhere. The ease with which he'd found Marcus. The certainty with which he'd made him leave. If you have any information about his whereabouts or his associates, you're legally obligated to share it, the second agent said. I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks. If that changes. I know, call you, I get it. The first agent handed her a business card. Real, this time, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Seattle Field Office. She took it, her hand shaking. For your safety, Ms. Reyes, stay away from Park Jihoon. Men like him are dangerous. They don't care who gets hurt. The agents left. Elena stood at the desk, staring at the card in her hand, her mind racing. Organized crime, Korean mafia, federal investigation. Every word felt like a punch. Jihoon had lied to her, or at least he'd hidden the truth. He wasn't just someone who knew how to keep her safe. He was someone who made his living in violence. Someone the FBI was investigating, someone dangerous. She should be terrified. She should throw away his card and forget she ever met him. But all she felt was a strange, sick confusion, because he'd helped her. He'd been kind. He'd looked at her like she mattered, and now she didn't know what was real. She finished her shift in a daze, locked up, took the bus home. Inside her apartment, she sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out the white card with the silver number. She stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. It rang twice before someone answered. Not Jihoon. A man's voice speaking Korean. She didn't understand the words. I need to talk to Jihoon, she said. It's Elena. Silence, then, 1 moment. The line went quiet. She waited, her heart hammering. A minute passed, 2, then Jihoon's voice calm and even. Elena. The FBI came to see me. Another silence, longer this time. Are you safe? Am I safe? She laughed, bitter. They told me you're mafia, that you're dangerous, that I should stay away from you. You should. Then why did you help me? I told you. No, no more half-truths. I want the real answer. Who are you? She heard him exhale, low and slow. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, almost human. I'm someone who's done terrible things to survive. I'm someone most people are right to fear. But I'm also someone who saw a woman in danger and couldn't walk away. Both things are true. Are you mafia? Yes. The word hung in the air between them. Elena closed her eyes. I should hang up. You should. Why aren't you telling me to? Because I don't want you to. Her breath caught. She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what to do with the honesty in his voice, the quiet confession. The FBI will be watching me now, she said. I know. So I can't see you. No, you can't. Then why did you give me your number? In case you needed me. I don't need you. Don't you? She wanted to say no. She wanted to hang up and block the number and erase every trace of him from her life. But she couldn't, because he was right. She did need him, not for safety, not for protection, for something else. Something she couldn't name. What happens now? She whispered. You go back to your life. You forget about me. You stay safe. And you. I do what I've always done. Which is? Survive. The line went quiet. She could hear him breathing, steady and slow. She imagined him somewhere in the city, alone, staring out at the rain. She imagined him the way she'd seen him in the library, calm and untouchable, a man the world was afraid of. Jihoon. Don't call this number again, Elena. It's not safe, for either of us. Will I see you again? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was soft, almost sad. I hope not. The line went dead. Elena sat in the silence, phone in her hand, tears burning her eyes. She didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling the world shift around her. She'd been right. Something had changed the night Marcus grabbed her, something fundamental. And now she couldn't go back. She couldn't unknow what she knew, couldn't unfeel what she felt. She was connected to Jihoon now, whether she wanted to be or not. And that connection was dangerous, maybe deadly. But it was also the most real thing she'd felt in years. 2 months passed. Summer faded into autumn. The city turned gray and wet, the air sharp with the promise of winter. Elena worked, read, slept, moved through her life like a sleepwalker. The FBI checked in twice, asking if she'd heard from Jihoon. She said no. They didn't believe her, but they couldn't prove otherwise. She thought about him every day, wondered where he was, what he was doing. If he thought about her too, she told herself it was stupid, dangerous. He was mafia, a criminal, someone the federal government was hunting. Getting involved with him would ruin her life. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and the rain drummed against the windows, she'd take out the white card and trace the silver number with her finger. And she'd let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like to call him again, to hear his voice, to ask him all the questions she'd never gotten to ask. She never did, but she kept the card, and that felt like hope. Then, on a cold October evening, she saw him again. She was leaving the library, pulling her coat tight against the wind, when a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The door opened. Jihoon sat inside, looking at her with those steady, unblinking eyes. Get in. Her heart stopped. Jihoon. Please, it's important. She should run. She should turn around and go back inside and call the FBI. But she didn't. She climbed into the SUV and the door closed behind her. The vehicle pulled into traffic. Jihoon looked the same, calm, controlled. But there was something different in his eyes, something urgent. What's going on? She asked. You're in danger. The words were a punch. What are you talking about? Marcus is back. He violated the restraining order. He's been watching your apartment. My people saw him last night. Her blood went cold. Are you sure? I'm sure. Jihoon's jaw tightened. He's not alone this time. He brought friends. They're planning something. How do you know? Because I've been watching you. The confession should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange, dizzy relief. You've been watching me. I never stopped. She stared at him, and for the first time she saw past the calm exterior to something raw underneath. Fear, not for himself, for her. Why? She whispered. Because I told you I'd keep you safe, and I meant it. The SUV turned onto a quiet street, pulling into the parking garage of a high-rise building. They rode the elevator in silence, tension coiling between them. Jihoon led her to a penthouse apartment, minimalist and cold, all glass and steel. You'll stay here tonight. My people are dealing with Marcus. Dealing with him how? Jihoon didn't answer. He crossed to the window, looking out at the city. His shoulders were tense, his hands in his pockets. She walked up beside him. Tell me the truth. What are you going to do to him? What I should have done the first time. Jihoon. He came back, Elena. He brought men with him. He's planning to hurt you. I can't let that happen. So you're going to kill him. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was something she'd never seen before. Raw, dangerous, almost desperate. Yes. She should be horrified. She should scream, run, call the police. But she wasn't horrified. She was tired, tired of being afraid, tired of Marcus haunting her, tired of pretending she could handle this alone. Okay, she said quietly. Jihoon went still. Okay. You're right, he won't stop, and I can't keep running. She met his gaze, steady. Do what you have to do. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he reached out, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. The touch was gentle, careful, like she might break. I won't let him hurt you, he said softly. I know. He dropped his hand and stepped back, and the moment shattered. He pulled out his phone, spoke in rapid Korean, and ended the call. When he looked at her again, the calm mask was back in place. Stay here, lock the door. I'll be back before morning. Jihoon. Trust me. She did. That was the terrifying part. She trusted him completely. He left, the door closed. She was alone in the penthouse, surrounded by glass and silence. Outside, the city glittered, and somewhere in the dark, Jihoon was hunting Marcus. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window and waited. Jihoon found Marcus in a warehouse south of the city, the kind of place where people went to disappear. He'd brought 2 men with him. Jihoon brought 5. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't meant to be. Marcus saw him and ran. Stupid. Predictable. Jihoon's men caught him before he made it 10 feet, dragging him back to the center of the warehouse. Jihoon walked slowly, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. You should have stayed in Portland. Marcus struggled, wild-eyed. I didn't do anything. You violated a restraining order. You stalked her. You brought men to her apartment. You planned to hurt her. Jihoon crouched in front of him. Did you really think I wouldn't know? This is insane. No, this is consequence. Jihoon stood. You had a choice. You made the wrong one. He nodded to his men. They pulled Marcus to his feet, dragging him toward the back of the warehouse. Marcus screamed, begged, promised he'd leave, promised he'd never come back. Jihoon listened to it all with perfect calm. When they reached the back room, Jihoon stopped. He looked at Marcus, his expression empty. I made Elena a promise. I told her I wouldn't kill you. I'm going to keep that promise. He paused. But I never promised you'd walk away whole. What happened next was efficient, clinical. Jihoon didn't participate. He didn't need to. His men knew what to do. They knew how to make pain last, how to make someone understand on a cellular level that they'd made a mistake. When it was over, Marcus was alive. Barely. Broken in ways that would never fully heal. Jihoon looked down at him, felt nothing, and walked away. Outside, the rain had started again. He stood in the parking lot, letting it soak through his coat, and thought about Elena waiting for him in the penthouse. She'd told him to do what he had to do. She'd trusted him, and he'd kept his promise. He hadn't killed Marcus. But he'd made sure Marcus would never hurt anyone again. He pulled out his phone and called the penthouse. Elena answered on the first ring. It's done. A long silence. Then, is he dead? No, but he won't come near you again, ever. Are you sure? I'm sure. Another silence. He could hear her breathing, slow and careful. Are you coming back? He should say no. He should tell her to go home, forget this ever happened, move on with her life. But he couldn't. Not tonight. Not when she'd looked at him and said okay, not when she'd trusted him with something no one else ever had. Yes, I'm coming back. He ended the call and got into the SUV. The drive back to the city felt longer than it should have. He thought about what he'd done, about the line he'd crossed, about the fact that Elena now knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of. Most people would run. Most people would be horrified. But Elena wasn't most people. She'd looked danger in the face and asked if she should be afraid, and when he'd said no, she'd believed him. He wondered if she still would. When he walked into the penthouse, she was standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself. She turned when she heard him, and her eyes searched his face. Are you hurt? No. Did you, she stopped, swallowed. Did you hurt him? Yes. She nodded slowly. Good. The word hung between them. Jihoon stared at her, something shifting in his chest. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't horrified. She was relieved, and that broke something in him. He crossed the room, closing the distance between them, and stopped inches away. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and clear. You should be afraid of me, he said quietly. I know. Then why aren't you? Because you've never given me a reason to be. He laughed, bitter. I just had a man beaten. I've killed people. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew. And you're telling me I've never given you a reason to be afraid. Have you ever hurt me? No. Have you ever lied to me? No. Then why should I be afraid? He didn't have an answer for that. He looked at her, this woman who'd handed him books without fear, who'd trusted him when she shouldn't have, who was standing in his apartment after everything and looking at him like he was worth something. "You're going to ruin my life," he said softly. She smiled, sad and small. "I think you've already ruined mine." He kissed her. He didn't plan to, didn't think about it. He just did. His hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her close, and she gasped against his mouth before kissing him back. It was slow, careful, nothing like the violence he'd just committed, everything like the promise he'd made. When they broke apart, she was breathing hard, her hands fisted in his shirt. "Stay," she whispered. "Elena. Please, just tonight. I don't want to be alone." He should leave. He should put distance between them before this got any worse. But he didn't. He stayed. Because she'd asked him to. Because he wanted to. Because for the first time in 15 years, he wanted something more than survival. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. She led him to the bedroom and they lay down together, fully clothed, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Outside, the rain fell. The city breathed. And for a few hours, Jihoon let himself believe this could be real. When Elena woke, Jihoon was gone. She sat up, the apartment silent around her, and felt the absence like a wound. On the nightstand, there was a note. "You're safe now. Go home, live your life, forget about me." Beneath it, a phone number, different from the first one, a direct line. "If you ever need me, call. I'll come." She read the note 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in her wallet next to the white card. She showered, dressed, and left the penthouse. The city was bright and cold, autumn sunlight cutting through the clouds. She took the bus home, unlocked her apartment, and stood in the doorway, looking at the small space that had once felt like safety. It didn't anymore, because she'd tasted something else, something dangerous and intoxicating and impossible, and now she couldn't go back. She pulled out her phone and stared at the new number. She should delete it. She should block it. She should do what Jihoon told her and forget about him. But she didn't. She saved it under a single letter, J**. And late that night, when the apartment was dark and the rain started again, she typed out a message. "Thank you." She didn't expect a response, but her phone buzzed a minute later. "Anytime." She smiled, small and private, and set the phone aside. Outside, the city moved and breathed and lived, and somewhere in the dark, Jihoon was doing the same. They were connected now, bound by violence and protection and something neither of them could name. It was dangerous, maybe deadly, but it was also real. And Elena had never felt safer in her life.